Wheatley, and welcome to episode 212 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are doing so. Thank you very much to Liam O'Wanley from the Hot House Flowers, but his solo stuff as well. I was kind of didn't want to lean into that last week because it's like bringing up the song "Don't Go" because everybody knows what it is, and then you don't want to ask the same questions to him all the time. But I think we did all right. It's good. And he's in his car, and he looks the part. You could also support us at Buy Me a Coffee. Link is in the description. All of that. Our guest this week is a writer and the author of Dirty Laundry, and her name is Disha Bose. How are you doing, Disha?
Good, great to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. I would like this will come out a few days after this, but we were just talking about Valentine's Day and me making you come on Valentine's Day, and it's an unfortunate timing, but we kind of got that out of the way, and I think we've kind of
Yeah.
forgiven each other.
We've forgiven each other, forgotten, and I also think that
Yeah.
it's actually a good day for the chat
Okay.
because um, you kind of, if you're distracted by Valentine's Day and then maybe you want to discuss something else, and this could be a good way to discuss something that's not necessarily all about that one token day of the year where you have to
Very
think
well.
of new ways of
Yes. Very well put, and I wish I kind of came up with that before we started recording, so I could say it then and make myself sound good. But I thank you very much for that, Dishes. So kind of get me out of it. So we always start at the beginning. Could you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
So I grew up in India, and I suppose I had a bit of a different upbringing to most other children in India because my dad was in the Air Force. So we kind of moved around a lot, and I grew up in these sort of armed military campuses. So quite sheltered, to say the least, which I suppose is quite different from most other Indian upbringings because I feel like most childhoods there are a bit more chaotic and out there, and to say the least. But and I was also quite fortunate because my parents are quite forward thinking and independent, and then put a lot of pressure in me about career and life decisions in general. So I would say that I'm quite fortunate, and I was allowed to kind of make my own decisions about education and eventually who I wanted to marry and how I wanted my life to look like. So sheltered, and also I was the only child, but also it was a kind of communal upbringing because I grew up in that sort of military campuses. I always had friends around and help around. So different. And then by the time I was 18, 19, I moved out of home, left the country, which is also, I know it's quite common in the West, but in India, especially 15 years ago, it wasn't that common. So, yeah, I didn't have a very regular Indian upbringing, and eventually turned into a very ordinary Western millennial. But um, yeah, which I suppose has, in a lot of way, lent to the adult that I am now.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Very good. I mean, we will talk about that again. We'll go back to talk a bit about India as well because of one of the characters in the novel who I found
Yeah,
a fascinating kind of look into the person, and maybe maybe I'll get into it. I'll say that's what happens. I get into one thing and then I start getting dragged, but we won't go there yet.
segues.
Yeah, it's segues, and I need to calm down on the segues. So also, could you tell us when you first became aware of mental health?
Yeah, so yeah, because I suppose I led that sheltered life, and also because mental health is not something that's openly discussed in India. It's kind of brushed under the carpet. One of the many taboo subjects in India. A lot of things you shouldn't be talking about in India, and mental health is on top of that list.
Okay.
Um, and I suppose because of those reasons, um, I wasn't well acquainted with the idea of mental health, and I was kind of living my life, going along, happy out, you know, and then I moved to the UK, met my now husband. We moved to Ireland, and it was only when we had our daughter that I became this 20 something, uh, kind of flapping my arms about, not knowing what I was doing because um, my daughter was just under a year old when the whole COVID pandemic thing
Hmm.
happened. And my family was anyway in India. They were there during the first couple of months when she was born, but then they had to go back, and then pandemic hit, and we were all kind of stuck in our homes. And I just found myself going through um, early parenting issues and being lost and kind of thrown into the deep end of things without any resources and help. And it's only now when we've been through that and I look back on it is, I look back on it and I shudder because I don't know how we made it through.
Hmm.
And it was all just so sort of normalized because even the public health nurse will tell you things like before the baby's born, she'll say things like, especially to first time parents, that, oh, you might experience a bit of baby blues, which is the term, blanket term that they all use, which is, oh, you might have bouts of crying and you might be a bit overwhelmed. And don't worry, it's all hormones. And even when I was going through all of that and it was quite intense, um, those words kept ringing in my head. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just baby blues. I'll get over it. It's all normal. And at some point, I realized that this can't be normal. Like,
Yeah.
this cannot and shouldn't be normalized. And it's shocking to me that not a lot of this is spoken about.
Hmm.
And women just tend to, maybe it's fed to women as a group. It's almost like this collective secret that motherhood and everything that comes along with it is normal, and everyone's experience is completely normal and the same when it really is not. And it's only now, over the last 2 years, that I've been kind of trying to speak to other women and kind of really prodding and poking and trying to get them to talk, and written a couple of articles as well about it. And just I just want more women to talk about it. And I just feel like it's not, especially this area of mental health is so normalized and kind of not spoken about enough. So yeah, very late in life, I'd say, is when I first introduced to mental health issues. And
We had a couple of people on Disha, like a while back now, um, speak about this as well, and the idea of being told that you might have a bit of something, or it's
mm,
downplaying something that is obviously can
yeah,
be very, very serious, and it's not something that you would say to someone who had, say, chronic depression or a severe anxiety, that you would kind of say, well, you might be a bit nervous going into the shops.
yeah,
It's just not something you say. So
exactly.
it's an amazing thing that you know still to this day the baby blues makes it sound so cute or something.
Almost joyful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
joyful.
almost, and it's almost spoken with a sense of you should be happy
Mm,
and you should be joyful. And whatever this other thing is on the side that you may or may not experience won't last forever. And okay, for the majority of women, sure, it's a hormonal thing and you get past it. Uh, but then there's so many women who are not able to cope
mm.
and don't have the resources and the knowledge and the help. And it leads to a lot of trauma and bad things. And I just feel like if people just spoke about it more often and openly and didn't make it such a taboo, that women would be more open to talk about it. Because it's almost like if you speak about it, then that you don't love your child or
Yeah,
you're unhappy or you don't want to be a mother anymore. And it's a fear of that as well. It's
yeah,
almost the women who do speak about it openly, a lot of women feel attacked almost by
yeah,
their families or friends or people around them because they're like, why are you speaking about this? Do you not love your child anymore?
yeah. You're
There's so many things
ungrateful. You
involved.
you
Yeah,
know that kind of idea, which is very horrible thing to kind of say to
yeah,
someone or claim about someone. But like you said, like you know, like a man coming on and telling people. But you know, the idea of you speaking out about it is very, very important, and you know, the more people who do, it'll become um easier then for everybody else to kind of mention it and say that they're going through
Yeah.
a certain um you know, depression or whatever the case may be. Um, so I want to talk obviously about writing and your book, but do you remember the first piece of fiction you wrote?
Oh my gosh. I think I must have been 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember because I had this diary full of, I used to write short stories
Okay.
and also illustrate them. And now when I look back, almost all those stories were about mental health
Really?
and anxieties. Yeah, I think the first one that I wrote, I haven't thought about this in years now, uh, but was about this girl who wanted to be exactly like her best friend.
Right.
And she had this anxiety about not wanting to be herself anymore. And it was kind of, I was trying to be funny, but I must have had those anxieties now
Mm.
when I think about it, because how else did I come up with this character as an 11 or a 12-year-old? But yeah, I'd drawn this girl, but I'm not an artist at all. So the illustrations are terrible. But yeah, and yeah, that must have been my first piece of fiction. I'd written some poetry before, but yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Well, that's it. That's fascinating. I think if it might be the case that it was anxieties, you know, something like that started it.
Yeah.
Um, what were you like? I'm one of those people who were kind of a late reader, so it took me like a while to get into novels and really start, you
Mm.
know, buying one after the other. Were you a big reader growing up?
Yes, I was a big reader. My parents kind of encouraged reading a lot, but I think what was different with me as a reader when I was growing up was I was fed all the classics.
Hmm.
So a lot of the old-timey sort of white man canon, the whole Charles Dickens
Yeah.
and that era, Shakespeare and all of that as well. But that's kind of what I grew up on. And then I went on to read English literature in college and postgrads and all of that as well. So I continued with that. And somewhere along the line, I lost my interest in reading literature, writing, all of that completely. And I think it was around the time when I realized that it doesn't grab me anymore. That's not the kind of uh, books I want to read anymore. And I was also seeing a lot of lack of, and I know this is a bit uh, I wouldn't say cliche, but people have spoken about it previously. Um, but there wasn't a lot of representation, at least when I was growing up. Um, the books that were kind of winning awards and were bestsellers, even in India, the books that you would find when you walk into a bookshop were all Western writers with uh, none of the characters who were like me or who I could relate to at all. So maybe there was a bit of that as well. And so my first job was actually, and what I did for a long time was not at all related to reading or writing or books at all. I'd kind of dusted my hands off of that completely. Yeah.
I was a bit like that. I think everybody goes through that if they do read a lot. The idea of, oh, I have to read all the classics and you know, the masterpiece by every
Yes.
author, and then you're just like halfway through and you're like, do I really have to read it? Like, I'm not sure I really have to.
I'm not enjoying this at
Yeah,
all. Yeah.
it's just like slog after slog, and then all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
like, I read Moby Dick and I was like, I liked it, but then there was like a bit of it was too much about the whales and anatomy. And I was like, oh God, you know, at certain moments where you're like, I don't need to be doing this. Like I need to be enjoying it.
No.
But so like
No.
what was the seed for Dirty Laundry then?
Oh, the Secret of Laundry was definitely when my daughter was born, and I wrote it during the pandemic
Hmm.
and towards the end of the pandemic, and I was stuck at home all the time. And obviously, because we weren't interacting with people, uh, the internet was kind of the point of connections and information and everything, basically. That was the whole world. And I was on a lot of these parenting Facebook groups and on Instagram and what have you. And I was one of those people who was kind of like lurking in the comment section a lot. Like I'd
Hmm.
just kind of read everybody's comments, and I was enjoying the drama that was unfolding in the comment section. And I kind of started thinking about how um, there's so many parallels between what you see on social media, especially on those kind of channels, with how maybe people interact in real life behind closed doors. And also this idea of how human nature kind of never really evolves from that whole toddler playground mentality of
Yeah.
kind of backbiting and quarreling over silly things and competitiveness and one-upmanship and all this. So yeah, just scrolling through social media is where I built the characters from. And the story kind of wrote itself, but I worked on the characters for months and only
Hmm.
in my head. Like I didn't even know that I was doing it. I was doing it subconsciously. Um, and then I kind of just decided that I had to write it down. And, yeah.
I think the idea that you're saying about like the group, I'm like that. I like reading comments on YouTube videos.
Yeah.
The more absurd the better, because I'm not going to get involved at any point, like, but I
No,
do.
not at all.
No, if I do like,
It's like watching a reality show
yeah,
almost, you know?
it
Yeah.
is, yeah. And that like whole thing, we do kind of love the whole idea of secrets and what the neighbors doing, like the twitchy curtains and
Mm,
all that. Like we
hmm.
love that, and
Yeah.
I think that's been represented, on TV uh quite a lot. Like Desperate
Hmm.
Housewives, programs like that.
Yes.
Um, but when you talk about your characters, there's a number of characters in the book, and we will try to avoid ruining anything for anyone.
Yeah.
But I do love the fact that they are very, very well written. There's not like a one
Yeah.
character that you're kind of like, oh, the name just pops up here and there. And that's pretty hard to juggle all those different personalities, I'm guessing.
Mm. Yes, definitely. But what I did, maybe what worked for me was I did these really intensive character studies for a lot of the characters, not just the three main female characters, but also their partners and even the children. And I still have that. It's like this big diary where I wrote down every little detail that I could think of about them and their past and their present likes and most of that, I'd say 80% of those notes have not gone into the book, but it really helped me kind of decide how they'd be acting um, in the book that I was writing, and just based on what cereal they ate in the morning. I don't know, like there's so many details in that, and that really helped me,
Yeah.
I think, is the characters.
I think there's like, so we'll say there's six main characters,
Yes, the
right?
three women and their partners, yeah.
Three and their partners, and only one of them is likable. Is that a bit harsh?
Is she likable? I don't
Well, is
know.
she likable?
The jury's out on that as well. A lot of Indian people did not like her. If she's the one you're talking about,
Yeah,
are you talking
no,
about
she is,
Mishi?
and
Yeah.
that's kind of, it was an interesting read because the idea of arranged marriages, and we hear about them. I
Mm.
mean, the weird thing though, like they're kind of on TV now with like Love at First Sight.
Yeah,
That's
yes,
kind of weird, isn't it?
exactly.
But
No, but also historically, that's
yeah,
what kind of like arranged marriages, if you look back on Western history as well, was how the sort of nobility and the gentry kind of did it,
yeah,
you know. And the non-arranged marriages were kind of left to the plebeians,
yeah,
so to speak. And uh, and obviously the West kind of did away with it eventually. But in India, it's so normal in India, even
yeah,
now. It has changed a lot, I'd say. A lot of my peers and my cousins and uh, it doesn't really happen that much anymore, but it's kind of switched now. So the kind of upper classes and the educated classes are not going in for arranged marriages that much
okay,
anymore, whereas the sort of middle and the lower classes are still doing it. It's almost, I don't know how that's kind of flipped, but it's still so normal in India.
yeah. It's again, it's something we hear about, and of course we're all like, God, that's terrible or not, because we don't understand the whole background of it.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to just shake your head and just say that's terrible. Like, it's, but,
Mhm.
but did you always have the idea of, have somebody like obviously the arranged marriage comes with the two people in, but was there always in your idea that you'd have someone from India or a couple from India in it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I
Okay.
think when I started writing the book, and it wasn't just about representation, but also about the fact that Mishti is in so many ways like me. I mean, her life trajectory isn't the same as mine, but I wanted someone who I could connect with and relate to in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And I feel like all three women I relate to, and a lot of women who've read the book have actually said this to me that they see themselves in each of the women. And I felt that way as well. And Mishti is sort of my Indian
Mm.
reflection of me. And I wanted that. And I wanted to bring a bit of more awareness into not just arranged marriages, but also the women who have these arranged marriages and then move abroad, which I think is a
Mm.
completely different kind of woman because now she's been completely detached from her family and her support system. And if this man, who is essentially a stranger to her, turns out to be not this great guy that his family's kind of sold him as, what happens to her then? Like that's
Mm.
always interested me. It's kind of scary as well. I mean, imagine, and at least Mishi speaks English, and most Indian women kind of do maybe or will at least be able to communicate. But imagine being stuck in a country where you don't speak the
Mm.
language, don't know anyone, and the only point of contact you have is this man who is could be, abusive or just dangerous to live with, and now
Yeah.
you're being forced to have a child and rear a family. Like all of that is so scary. And yeah.
Uh, so, like I said, like if I was to pick one the character that I do like, it would be Mishti. But it's interesting to
Mm,
hear that, like, from people over in India that they didn't like her so much. Do you think that's like a blind spot for me, or do you think it's a cultural difference, or do you think like why do you think? I know it's hard for you to say why other people may not like a character because obviously we all like and dislike different characters for different reasons.
yeah.
But do you think it could be something like that?
Yes, and also there's an aspect of Indian people perhaps not appreciating Indian characters represented in a certain way.
Okay.
Just like a lot of Indian readers actually really enjoyed Kira and Lauren's character, where I know a lot of Irish readers, Western readers might have been completely aghast by them and the way they were leading their lives, but they found them interesting.
Mm.
And I think in the same way that a lot of Western readers found Mishti and that relationship interesting. Yeah. So it's a point of perspective and also cultural differences. And
Yeah,
yeah.
like I so like I said to you, I obviously love the novel because it's why, like I said, before we start recording, I said it would be strange if I had John if I didn't like it, just started slagging it off or whatever. But I liked it for a number of reasons. But one is that whole kind of secrets thing. The idea
Mm,
of we all like want to know what everybody's doing. Um, we've all had the experiences where we kind of think we have a friend, but they're not. We're not. Then we kind of realize maybe they're not a
mm,
friend, and and the I love when there is depth to characters, like I mentioned before, and there's depth to the
mm,
relationships because I think
thank you.
you can see some of those, in your own
Yeah.
past
Yeah,
relationships, moments or little things that might have happened. You're kind of like, I recognize that. Don't like it. Doesn't
that
make me feel
feeling.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that feeling and the
Yeah.
whole thing of like, um, what's interesting as well is about like Instagram in particular, and one of the characters in the novel is very popular on Instagram, and so has a
Hmm.
kind of a backing, within the community
Hmm.
as well.
Followers. Yeah.
Yeah, and we see that thing. I like the way you write about how, it's one side where we're on Instagram and everything's shiny and bright, and then when the camera's not rolling, it's babies
Straight to
and
the dead
yeah,
pan. And
everything just goes. And we've seen
yeah.
that in the
Yeah.
in the wild. It's kind of
Oh my
like
goodness. Yeah. Like you pose for a picture and the moment the camera is off, the face just
just goes.
changes. The
Yeah.
laughter is gone. And yeah.
And it's brilliant in that way that the kind of the tension starts to build up. And like I said, I'm
Mm,
not going to go near the whole spoiler thing. And spoilers is a weird one as well, isn't it? Like, because we always think of spoilers in the terms of films or TV or something like that, but they can be very much an aspect of the book. Do you care? This is a question that's kind of just popped into my head, but do you care if you know what happens in a novel before the end?
That's a very good question because most of the times I don't.
Yeah.
I feel like a book is an investment of your time
Mhm.
and the the enjoyment of reading rather than a quick adrenaline rush. I mean, there are books that fulfill that, but for me as a reader, I'm enjoying the language and the technique and just spending a good 6, 7 hours reading a book and that. Um, and especially with a book like this one, Dirty Laundry is definitely a slow burn. It is
Mhm.
the big reveal is sort of already there at the end of
Yeah.
that first section, really. And that the rest of the book you kind of even forget. And that was my idea with the book as well. Like you forget what happened in that first section. You
Mm.
kind of just want to get to know the characters and rather than a who done it, more of a why done it, really,
Yeah.
was the point of the book. Yeah.
That's what's kind of interesting about it as well, because you're right. You do forget about it, and you're going along with the characters, and you're learning. You're like, that person's not very nice, and that person, you know. But as it goes on, and starts to build, then it starts to come back into your head what happened early on, and then it's kind
Mm,
of, then it starts to become like you're right, like the who done it and the why it was done kind of a thing is always
mm,
there. I didn't guess like the one disappointment that I had with the work of it was a work of fiction, but I saw it on film. Was Murder
mm.
on the Orient Express. Now,
Okay.
yeah, because like the ending that was like a massive cop out, and then I was kind of
Yeah.
that's the only one that I don't want it to happen because then it's like. Well, it was, in the Murder on the Orient Express. Well, I spoil it. It's out a long time. I'll spoil it.
Well, it's also based on a book that's that was written a long time
Yeah,
ago.
even longer. But just that
Yeah.
idea, to me it felt like a cop out in that sense because of the fact that it wasn't just one person; it was everybody, and
Mm,
that was kind of like,
mm,
that's a bit like, and who am I to have a
mm,
go at Agatha Christie? But you know what I mean? It's just it was though it was one of those moments. But did like in your book, it had those kind of swings, up and downs until the very end, and
mm,
it's great. Why do you think it's as successful as it is? And it's another thing. It's been recommended over in the States as well, so it's kind of
mm.
all over really.
I think it was mainly because women really recognize the characters, and I do think that it's uh, like I was saying, the plot of the book and the kind of whodunit and
Mhm.
the adrenaline kick. I don't know if that's what Dirty Laundry really fulfills, and I think where it worked for a lot of female readers and a lot of men as well who enjoyed the book, like yourself, I think is they kind of got a peek into what really goes on in these like female friendship groups and mothers, the yummy mummies, I suppose. And that kind of worked, I think, for a lot of women because they recognized that they have friends like that or they've had experiences like that, and that got them really invested in the story, which I'm really grateful for. And that was kind of my purpose with writing the book to begin with. So,
I didn't
yeah.
think of that, but yeah, like the idea of the the gang mentality of Kira's like friends and stuff, but the bitchiness of that. Look, lads are just as bitchy as women. Like, just in case
Yeah,
nobody
sure.
knows, yeah, this is a fact. But um, from the way you write it and your point of view, it'd be
Mm,
different to the way I might write it. From my point of view. So it's interesting. I didn't think of it in that sense of seeing. Obviously, I loved the characters, but seeing the relationships between the characters and the kind of the edge that Lauren has it's a little bit scary,
hmm.
but you're not so much scared of the character, but you're curious of why she is the way she is.
Yeah.
But I guess we've all been like that to somebody, maybe not to that extent.
Yeah, we've all had instances, and that's how I felt about, and not just the female characters, but
Hmm.
even the three main male characters, the partners. I feel like I've known men like that,
Yeah.
had boyfriends like that, and they're all kind of versions of all the people I've known and just amalgamated into these six characters. And maybe because I was writing from that place of having known these people, that people who read and enjoyed the book also felt that way, that they know them and could relate to those experiences.
Yeah, I know those lads too. We all know those lads. But so I think people who are out there who are writers and stuff are always kind of interested in finding out about the publishing journey that you might have had.
Mm, yeah. So for me, it was firstly, I've been trying to write a novel for a long time. Just to get that out of the way with over 10 years,
Hmm.
I tried and failed. And I suppose I never really finished a single book until I wrote Dirty Laundry. So I have loads of unfinished manuscripts lying about. And with Dirty Laundry, because of that process, because of being in COVID and having my own mental health issues, and I kind of felt like time was running out almost because I had this child now that I had to care for as well. And I was like, if I don't write a book now, when I'm literally stuck in the house and I have nowhere to go, so I wrote it.
Mm,
And I had I wouldn't say that my publishing experience is the norm because I know that not everybody experiences it the same way. But
mhm,
for me, it happened very quickly. I wrote the book and I hadn't even edited it. I kind of didn't have a second draft. I just sent it off to agents, which is something that I will recommend every writer to do before you publish, to get an agent because they're like your legal representation. So you don't have to do any of the talking and all
mhm,
of the dealing and all of that. Um, so yeah, I sent it out to agents, heard back very quickly from a couple of them, and Marianne O'Connor, who was on top of my list of agents, she got back to me. And then yeah, she signed me on, sent it on to a couple of publishers, and so me having finished the book to me getting the book deals happened in a span of about 2 weeks,
wow.
probably even 10 days, 10 days to 2 weeks. But that's definitely not the norm.
Yeah.
And it's with my second book, it's been a completely different experience. So it kind of works sometimes and then it doesn't some other times. Yeah.
Uh, the difficult second album,
Mm.
whole idea of it. Had you been when you were writing Dirty Laundry? Did you finish Dirty Laundry before you started this second book, or we already had these kind of plans in place?
I had a different second book idea.
Okay.
I finished Dirty Laundry and then I started writing the second book around the time that Dirty Laundry was published.
Okay.
Because, the whole idea was, oh, ride the wave, this book is doing well,
Mm,
get the second book done with. And that was kind of what was encouraged by everyone who wants the best for me. But then I fell back into my usual habit of not being able to finish writing a book. And I was really struggling with my second book um, until I decided that I needed to put it down. It was just not working.
mhm,
And I had an idea for another book, um, and I wrote it. And I wrote it very quickly. I think I wrote it in about 10 days, which is I didn't think I could ever do that. And I was so desperate to finish it that I was literally writing it on my phone. Like I was staying up at night in bed, writing it on my phone
wow.
while lying down. I was just desperate to get it out. Um, and then everyone who read it, which was my agent and some other readers, was like, "This book won't work because it is in a completely different genre,
Okay.
and a completely different book from Dirty Laundry." And I suppose with writers, it's almost like musicians where you make a name for yourself in a particular genre,
Mm,
and everybody kind of expects you to stick to that genre. And they were discouraging me until they read the whole book and realized that it's almost worth it to take that leap of faith.
yeah.
Which is why with this book, it's been a way longer publishing process. But yeah, thankfully, my publishers kind of agreed, and
Good.
everyone has kind of, you know, decided that they'll see how it goes, and I have my fingers crossed. But it's definitely a big leap of faith on everybody's part. But yeah.
Is it some sort of like space opera, or is it like
No, I wish it was. Maybe my
Which
third
one?
book will be. But no, it's a romantic drama comedy would be
Okay.
my best way to describe it. So, and full of likable characters, which I suppose no one was expecting
Yeah,
from
yeah.
me. They didn't realize I knew how to write a likable character, but yes, it's completely different. So I suppose that's the
Which is kind of, you know, like you mentioned, when you're expected to ride the wave, as you said,
mm,
you're expected to kind of write the same kind of thing, and there's a certain amount of you got to dig your heels in a bit, I suppose, because everybody's looking for the same stuff. But for you to be interested in the project, like it has to be your decision rather than everyone else.
exactly. And that, yeah, exactly. That's the conversation I had with my agent as well. And I said, look, I tried to write the second book in a similar vein as Dirty Laundry. It's not working for me. And
Yeah,
maybe I'll have another book in that genre, but right now I don't. And I would rather write this book that I literally just kind of just threw out there in 10 days. And obviously I'm invested and thankfully it's worked. And I also feel like there's no need to get pigeonholed. I think that's the thing that I want to avoid. And I want to kind of like flex all the muscles and kind of
yeah.
figure out really how differently I can write. And that's what's keeping it interesting for me. Um, yeah.
I think it's
Hopefully I find my genre eventually. But
Yeah, but I love the fact that maybe you don't like you won't, and that you will move around and go to different. Because
mm,
I suppose it happens more in films than in
mm.
in writing or in music. But people can move away from the genre that they started in a lot easier in films for some reason. Whereas,
Is it easier though? But I mean, I feel like a lot of, especially actors,
mm,
kind of get if you've been doing, say, Meg Ryan or Richard Gere from the early 90s, like they were the boy and the girl next door in the
mhm,
romantic comedies. And I can't imagine Meg Ryan doing this really serious role in the mid 90s. I don't
yeah,
know if she would have been able to or got a role like that. I think they need to take a break and then come back, maybe. Maybe that's how it works. But I
yeah.
don't know if it's ever easy to switch lane. Yeah.
Yeah, like I might be thinking in the sense in the wrong way of maybe when like a director has enough kind of clout that they can maybe start doing it
Yes.
then or something like,
Hmm.
or maybe before they have clout when they're really independent that they can mess around with what they
Hmm.
want to do and then maybe turn like if there's someone like Tarantino or Spielberg or those kind of ones,
Yes.
they,
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like
yeah,
if Stephen King wrote a romance now, everyone would buy it,
yeah,
regardless. Like it doesn't matter. It's him, so
yeah.
everyone's gonna buy it. Exactly. But you have that cloud to think it, yeah. But I don't.
Yeah,
Not
well,
yet.
not yet, but
Um,
you could always write dirtier laundry. There's a title that's going for free.
really dirty linen, yes.
Really dirty linen. Yeah, that's even better. People will want to know the balance between because you mentioned when you wrote it, the balance between a writer's life and the family life.
Oh, yeah, it's a toughie.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think my process is different in that I go through long periods of time where I don't write at all.
Okay.
I don't edit, and sometimes I won't even read. I just kind of detach myself and I pick up things like knitting, like just because I want to detach from the process. Um, and then when I come back to writing, everybody around me knows that I'm writing.
Yeah.
My husband, my friends, my family, my daughter, my cat, everyone knows. And then I'll have these weeks where I don't want to speak to anyone. I don't want to leave my office. I don't want to do the chores. That's just my process. And it's not the easiest because I know when I'm going through those periods of time, it's hard on everybody. And
Yeah.
it's just the way I'm able to work. But then I have like I'll have 3, 4 months where I do everything around the place. But that's how I balance it. I'm sure other people will have better advice on how to balance it, but I'm not able to balance it. I'm not one of those people who can kind of multitask at
But
all.
that in itself uh, is your well, I guess it's your kind of balance, like the kind of
Yeah.
completely submerge yourself in the work for a certain period of
Mm,
time and then come and it's interesting that you said about when you're not writing, you mightn't be even reading. Like it's almost like you need to
No, yeah.
get away from the words, like
Oh,
altogether.
completely. Because I think in the last kind of 5, 6 years, even when I'm reading, it's almost like work because I'm
Yeah.
trying to analyze the way this writer has written this book.
Mm.
I do enjoy it, but it also feels like there's a part of my brain that's constantly like, oh, and like every time there's something like a plot twist or just a really beautiful sentence. I'm like, can I do this?
Yeah.
Like, so even when I'm reading a book, it feels like work. So I need to detach myself from reading as well.
I was talking to someone there recently. I used to write short stories quite a bit, and
Okay.
it would be kind of like uh feast or famine kind of a situation. But
Hmm.
people were asking me like, why don't you send it off? And I was just like, I don't want to send it off. It's not like that. And I never really knew. Okay, so I don't know if you got this um back when you were working on the first novel, but I kind of figured out that I didn't want to write in case somebody liked a story and then I had to write another one.
Oh my gosh, yes. And the imposter syndrome, which kind of
Yes.
goes hand in hand. Yes. And this is, I think, the reason why when I was working on that book that didn't work out is almost like I felt like I needed to satisfy all of these
Mm,
people, and my agent and my publisher and the people who liked the first book, that I need to deliver. And also this fear of getting found out, almost like, oh, this first one worked, but am I ever going to be able to do another one? And then I'm going to be found out as the imposter. And yeah, it's a terrible fear.
I
You'll never get over it as well.
yeah, we like
Unfortunately.
we could honestly, Disha, talk about we could like rename this podcast uh, uh, more to do with imposter syndrome than anything else for the simple reason like every time somebody comes on who's successful like in writing or films or music or all the types of things they do, therapists, everybody comes on and we're all like have imposter syndrome. It's now different
Hmm.
degrees, obviously, like different shades of it or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, but even I'm doing this podcast and I'm like, I'm asking you to come on. I was like, well, why would you want to come on my podcast? It just comes in and we
Yes,
all
I
have
know.
it.
I completely get it. Yeah. Yeah, I know. And one of my cousins, she's a really successful producer in Hollywood, and she's she's like doing really good for herself, like really good TV shows that she works on. And she says that every time she goes into a meeting with all of these producers, and they're all looking to her because she's really good at her job, she still, like to this day, 10 years later, can't believe that she works there. And when I heard her say that, I'm like, I felt a little bit better
Yeah.
because it goes to show how alike we are as human beings, that we all kind of suffer this. And I think as well as when you kind of have this dream that you want to achieve, no matter how small it is or whatever kind of dream that is, once you've achieved that dream, that's kind of when it hits you. And when you realize that, okay, it's done now, should I really even be here? Am
Mm.
I worth it? And yeah.
I think, Jay-Z is having these thoughts. I think everybody's having these
I
thoughts.
bet you. I
Yeah.
bet you. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's one of those few people.
One
He's
of the,
not.
yeah, there might be a very small
Beyonce doesn't
percentage.
have those thoughts.
No,
If
she
anything,
she
Jay-Z has those thoughts. She doesn't. But yeah.
Yeah, that sounds more likely. If anything, she should be the one that's not having them, I think. There's certain people in the
Yeah.
world that are not. But like, it's funny and who's to say, and we're all kind of like thinking, how did we get here or should we be here? All that. So it's
Exactly.
an ongoing battle
Yeah.
of life. Are you reading anything right now?
I just finished reading Linda Marin's book. It's
Mhm.
called Last Chance in Paris. She's a Cork writer as well, actually. It's a wonderful book. I'm recommending it to everybody.
I was going to say, is it good? And then you'd be like, no, it's terrible. But it's a good
No,
book.
I actually read it. I read it in India, but also it's funny because I was reading an Irish author in India, and everybody said, "You are you that homesick for Ireland that you brought along an Irish author's book to India?" But it's perfect for Valentine's Day,
How was
actually, on the
your
subject.
how was your holiday over there? It was nice.
Oh yeah, it was a shock to the
Oh,
system.
really?
Because I hadn't been back for 4 years.
Oh.
We went just after my daughter was born. That was her first trip, and the plan was to go back every year, and that just never worked out. So yeah, 4 years. Um, it's a shock to all the senses.
Um,
So it's the heat and the pollution and the noise, and the food is amazing, and then seeing everybody, and then it's a shock when you come back as well. It's like,
yeah,
oh, people are following road rules here.
yeah.
Okay.
How odd, how
So,
odd. But it's we had people go. I work in a gym, and we had people go off to Spain and whatever, like and
mm,
they always come back, and they always kind of like, oh God, it's tough being back and all that. And I'm like, well, that's why I don't go on holiday because I'm never disappointed to come back. You know,
no, I'll tell you, I am such a homebody.
right?
I couldn't buy. We were there for about a little more than 2 weeks. By the fifth day, I wanted to come back home. And I
Really?
know it's terrible to say that, yeah. And I'm from India. I had my parents and my family there, and I was eating the best food, which I'd missed for 4 years. All of that. I just love my routine, and I love being at home, and I just love the independence. And in India, how it's different as well, because you have someone to drive you around, and you have
Yeah,
someone to do the laundry and cook for you and do the dishes and clean the house, all of that. And it's very normal. It's not, you don't have to be affluent to have domestic
yeah,
help. um but it's strange because I wake up in the morning and there are like these four different people other than family who are just doing things around you, and I just wanted to be alone.
yeah.
Just couldn't be alone.
It's
So I was yearning to get back.
I think
Yeah.
that's interesting because I'm the same as you then with the idea of routines, just the
Mm,
comfort within them and even if it's not particularly a busy day or whatever, I just like knowing where I'm going to be.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
just very
Knowing where I'm going
comforting.
to be, and knowing that I have my little things that I have to do. And I know it's ridiculous, but I have to like have this particular coffee every
Yeah,
day, or like I have to have this particular snack. I mean, I don't know. I should probably really think about that. But just missing those silly things is
yeah,
kind of like the coffee tastes different in India. The bananas taste nicer in India, but they're still not the same ones that I get at Tesco here. And that kind of just was annoying me. Yeah, those kind of things.
I get that. Do you then now you may have answered this already in a different way, but do you find creativity good for your mental health?
Yes,
Good.
definitely. Creativity good for my mental health, and also obviously along with the routines, but I use my writing to feel better.
Mm,
That's how I know that it's good for my mental health. And even like I was saying, so I'll go for like 3, 4 months without writing. And then something will happen that makes me really anxious and nervous. And all I want to do is come back to my house and write. And I could be writing something very random. It doesn't have to be part of a big project,
yeah,
but just kind of doing that puts me back on track again. So yeah, definitely good for
yeah.
my mental health.
It's It's a great thing that we talk about an awful lot about creativity, whatever way you are being creative and how it is something that's very
Mm,
rewarding for your mental health. And somebody said to me recently, but kind of challenged me on it, was saying like, well, yeah, but not everyone's creative. But I also understand that. But we can't
mm.
cover every single person with every sentence we say. So it was kind
No,
of,
of course not.
you know,
It's for the person who is creative.
exactly. Yeah. It was that I
And
think,
it's not just
go on.
Oh, I was saying that it's not just the writing. Like even on the days that I'm not writing, all I want to do to kind of unwind is knit. And
Yeah.
I have my earphones in and I listen to an audiobook while I'm knitting. And that's my way to unwind in the day, even when I'm not writing. So I feel like there's a certain strain of people who, for them, any sort of creative outlet helps. And it doesn't have
Correct.
to be a chore or a task, but yeah.
Another question we always ask. Now, this is probably a silly question to ask someone, a writer and someone who has a 4-year-old. But what do you like to do in your spare time? Knit, I suppose.
Knit and listen to audiobooks while I'm knitting. That is the answer to the
Yeah.
question. I'm also doing this new thing where I'm doing paint by numbers,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is brilliant. They convert like photographs that you send them into these huge canvases, and then it's paint by numbers. So you paint and it comes out as like a painting
Yeah.
version of the photograph that you sent them. That's my new thing. I do that. And I also do a lot of driving, which I really enjoy. Again, I listen to an audiobook while I'm driving. So yeah, it really helps me unwind. That's my fun. And I eat out a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look,
So
that's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. So, Disha, before we go, where can people find you? They can obviously find Dirty Laundry pretty much any bookshop at this stage and
yeah,
online as well.
yeah. Yes,
What
just
about yourself?
I'm on Instagram,
Yeah.
which is where I'm usually active. I'm not really active on Twitter. Disha Bossy is my handle. Um, yeah, love to
That's
hear from people.
it was listen, Disha, you were a fantastic guest. I wouldn't want to spend Valentine's with anyone else.
Oh, thank you, Derek.
No, you were. It
I'm
was
going to
brilliant.
go and remind my husband that it's Valentine's Day
Yeah, um, that that's nothing to do with me. Don't say anything about me mentioning it 4 times about Valentine's Day. Just
now.
stick with me for 1 minute if you don't mind. I'll just close out. We'll go to a quick
Absolutely.
photo
Okay.
and we'll go. Okay, thank you very
Yeah.
much. Um,
Thanks for having me, Derek.
oh, it was brilliant. Thanks very much to John as well for all the tech support that he does. I always thank my mum, my granddad, Jared and Calvin. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you would. That always helps. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and X, but we're not really on X because I don't like it. So fair play, Disha. We're also on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, all the rest. Give us a review and all that stuff. And obviously, for the people who tuned in today, thank you very much for doing so. And once again, Disha, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Derek. It
You're
was
welcome.
fun.
Everybody else, see you next week. Bye.